Alrighty then.
Come on.
Here we are again. Energy.
Yeah.
Getting better, getting better.
We get in there. We get in there, man. We get in there. We get in there. More believable. That's good. That's good. Hey, everybody. How you doing? Welcome to another episode of The Living Room. I hope you guys are having a fantastic weekend and an even better Sunday today. Here in the UK, it's a bit darker now at this time, so no sunshine, nothing at all. It's pretty dark. But thank you for taking the time to join us. As usual, we ask you to share and just invite your friends and your colleagues and your network and stuff to come and join. It's me, Andre. I'm here with my dear friends, Mark and Philip. How are we doing, guys?
Doing good.
Yeah, man.
Doing-
Totally, man. Looking good, boy. Wow.
You mean me or you mean Philip?
Like they had a really nice,
Yeah, man. I see there, all well lit, piano in the corner. You know you had to have the piano in the corner. And what's not.
Yeah, man. But all is good. All is
Looking
good. You
good.
know. You're right there with the darkness, boy. It's like real dark already, yeah.
Man, what? Outside dark, yeah. This is something else. Usually, I used to the last few months now when we started this, you had to, negotiate the sun going down and the curtains drawn and all that. Now, I think this is it now. We final going down is until winter.
Yeah, boy. Yeah.
Until winter. But
Yeah,
how things at your side? You see a big announcement might be coming this week. What y'all think that happened there?
Boy, I think this is only going one direction now.
Mm-hmm.
We going right back to lockdown here in the UK. That's
I got a feeling so too. I mean, when you look at this stuff here with the cases, this is what we're looking like, guys. This is the curve that we're looking at the moment.
Yeah.
And you can see where we headed, and it's not being letting up. And at the moment, this is just cases, so don't freak out and think this is deaths or anything like that. This is just cases. But usually there's a lag regarding the hospital visits and what's not. And I saw this week as well that they actually did make an announcement and telling the hospitals to clear the beds and what's not in potential preparation, given what's happening with the cases. So.
Well, we have the Nightingale Hospital up here in Birmingham, and that has been put on alert. So all that means really is, we are looking to probably bring that into service at some point over the next couple of weeks or months. So it's crazy. It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Well,
I hope they had the learnings from the first time, and hopefully the death rate isn't what it is, and people get better and what's not. So I hope there's some learnings there, and even though there's no vaccine.
Yeah,
So
I think that's the case, and even with the testing, there's a lot more testing now. So what we're also seeing is that there are more tested cases as well, and which is why I think this is my theory, and that's why we're seeing such a rapid return to that peak.
But is the percentage of positives and cases going down though, or is that going up? Because if you're testing a lot more and the percentage of tested to positive going up, then it means that there is an issue in the community.
I do believe there's an issue. Don't get me wrong. I do believe there's an issue.
Yeah, they had a fella.
Hey, Miriam.
They had a fella in North America was putting forward that theory about testing. But anyhow.
But was he wrong? If you don't test it, no cases. Hi, Avril, how you doing?
Well, yeah. The truth is it is really getting very serious though. I mean, in fact, on Friday I was listening to a presentation here locally, and they were saying we've got 15 kids in Wolverhampton at the moment with symptoms, right? 15 kids.
15
And
kids.
but you know what that means. However, 1,000 kids are being home from school because of those 15.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course.
So this is how the whole system is really starting to fall apart, because as soon as kids go into school, they get symptoms, but that whole class is gone. And this is now starting to affect a lot more kids than just those who've got symptoms, and it's just starting to spread. So I fully expect the lockdown is coming.
Yeah, I think so. I know they're trying to hold out from doing it, but I almost can't see any other way at this point in time, unless, which is my suspect, I just suspect that we doing this whole herd immunity thing, but we just not coming overtly out and saying it. That's my... The Swedes have done it, and they're carrying on. Exactly, and I have a feeling that Boris is kind of a bit, let's just get on with it.
He can't say that.
But he can't say it. So I think that's what's
there's a real
happening.
challenge with communication. Coming from the leadership of the UK. And I think the communication is coming out as though, and the sentiments you're seeing people express is this is something you are you are doing to us, as opposed to something that you're doing for us and with us.
Yes.
And that's where they need to change the way they communicate, because it's coming over as though, we're watching you and we're gonna punish you if you gather together. But that real sentiment of this is something we have to do as a nation if we want to get through this together with minimal damage.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
isn't coming through clearly.
Unless you're gathering some place with a cash register.
Very, 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 very true.
That is the only place that makes a difference. Yeah.
But look, apart from COVID, guys, I think there's only one main story coming out recently, and that has to be,
Wow.
has to be this. What are y'all thinking? What do y'all guys think? The big announcement this week.
Well, look, I heard the announcement and I was quite excited about it. In the same way that I was excited when Mr. Arthur did the same thing back in 2003, and then Mr. Stewart did the same thing back in 2015.
Okay.
However,
You feel this time is for real?
well, it's interesting because the Constitution of Barbados allows for a 2/3 majority votes in the House of Parliament to achieve this.
You think
right?
you get it?
Well, of course you can get it.
That's a joke, man. Of course it's 32.
You know. So I think the timing, even though you can say you've heard these things historically, there's no question that this is very, very much likely to happen next year, and it's the right thing. It is the right thing.
I think
On
so.
what
I think
basis
it's
do you
about
say it's
time.
the right thing? I believe it's a good thing as well, but I want to hear, why do you think it's the right thing?
Because I do not believe that a nation like Barbados should still be looking to Great Britain as its head of state. That's one reason. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's important for nations of the Caribbean, and perhaps we need to even factor this whole discussion up, not just about the Republic of Barbados, but the Caribbean itself.
Yeah.
But nations of the Caribbean have got to really look at how we want to chart our course. We can't make arguments for reparations on one hand, but still want to cling on to the coattails of the British. That doesn't work. If you're going to argue for reparations and we want to steer our own shit, we're going. Okay?
Yeah.
I think so. But that's just my opinion. I'm sure the guys who are watching this evening might have a completely different view, or some people might agree.
Yeah, I mean,
was thinking about it in terms
go ahead, Phil.
No, I was thinking about it in terms of three relationships, right? One is the relationship you have with yourself. Two is the relationship with your neighbors. And three is your relationship with the world. And generally, if you're making such a decision, and you look at how are those three relationships affected by that decision, that could drive, is this a go or not? And when I thought about it, the relationship with ourselves as a nation, that could certainly be enhanced by making the stance that the head of state is now a local, elected by us, right? That changes our relationship with ourselves. Relationship with the region, that's to be seen. But again, I think it does give us that freedom to look a bit more regionally, and then the relationship with the world. If we're not hung on to, as Mark said, the coattails of Britain, we're going to push to look a lot further.
Look, I agree with all that. I mean, for me, is an identity thing. Is at what people might argue, is it the right time? Is this COVID period? We got an economy to think about, all that kind of stuff. But over the years, I think it's proven that when will be the right time. I think that you just have to do it. After all these years, over 50 years, we've got to do it. And I know, and I wish the other Caribbean islands would follow suit as well, because I think sometimes it forces you when you make a key decision like that. It forces you to do things differently. It forces you to look more. And when I say inward, I don't mean it in an insular way, but I mean it forces you. I think it helps with your creativity, your innovation, your identity of self, your ability to value yourself a little bit more, and it just means that you're just out there charting your course and steering your own ship. And I think the time is right. And I see some people arguing against, but. Little English title. Avril. Well, oh Lord, I don't know. I just think
to see what was the history of that title. Who gave Barbados that?
Who gave us that title? That's true. That's very true. But I just think the time is right, and I think once we do it, I think then it'll be a case where we just see the potential of our people just increase. Not increase, because the potential is there, but us beginning to realize the potential of our people, not just in Barbados, but across the region as well. So I think the time is right.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that caught my eye in the region this week, even though we're talking about how we feel about others, I saw a story that Barbuda is potentially looking to split from Antigua.
Yeah. But that's been something ongoing for quite some time, though, hasn't it?
Well, just like the Republic conversation, huh?
Yeah, I think that's been something that's been ongoing for a while, where people have been having those conversations. I mean, we also see some interesting things as well.
Guyana?
I don't even know what to say about he.
You only gotta smell oil and then it'll be in.
Guyana, right?
If you light your stove, right, it is very likely that an American airline gets passed over your house. Okay? The whiff of oil. Now, what are you doing in Guyana?
Well,
Huh?
I
Who
think.
trying to keep up?
Well, I think that's got a lot of implications, because in my opinion, over the last 2-3 years, the Americans have been trying to slowly carve off different bits of the Caribbean and deciding how they treat different bits. In my opinion, forcing a bit of wedge within CARICOM and what's not. There was already a bit of a wedge there, but the external factor of the USA is a huge draw, and I think I've seen them doing it a bit more. Guyana now has the potential to be on the top table if the oil reserves that are predicted to be there are realized. And I think that's what it's all about. It's also a little bit of flex to Venezuela, and trying to say, don't look over there, we got you, and that kind of stuff. And I think it's also a bit of a potential wedge for CARICOM. I think it was an overt shot across the bow to CARICOM, as has been being done in the last couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, and it's a very divisive move, you know. And this is a really important moment for CARICOM and the Caribbean. And I just hope that we don't see a real split within CARICOM because of how the oil in Guyana might become very valuable to those up north.
Well, yeah. Well, once he's sniffing boat, he's sniffing boat. So
That is to be seen.
he's sniffing boat there now. So I think we're going to see a little bit more of that story coming over the years.
It's just not Guyana, it's also Suriname as well.
Well,
isn't it?
yes.
Well,
right.
yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Suriname just had a huge change in government there as well. So
Yeah.
there's the potential to get in early and to see, and to do what they normally do. So I think we got to watch that,
Yeah.
And St.
Listen-
Kitts had independence there. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Yes, I was going to say happy independence to our friends in St. Kitts and Nevis who celebrated their 37th yesterday. And did you see the cases in Jamaica for COVID? Because the COVID cases in Jamaica and the deaths suddenly seem to be, increasing day on. Yeah.
There's a problem there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, is tourism related? But now in the community? Thoughts?
Well, when we had Stuart and Charmaine back in episode 3, I remember they were saying that there was a real outbreak in St. Catherine.
St. Catherine.
That was related
Call
to
center,
a call
was it?
center. Yeah. But if you look there, you can see that really there hasn't really been a taking hold of St. Catherine and Kingston, because those two still remain the epicenters of what's happening in Jamaica. So maybe if anybody's in the comments this afternoon and know or on the ground can tell us what's happening, but this is quite serious.
Indeed. Hey, Nicole, how you doing? Yeah, this is quite serious, and I think we've seen a similar thing happening in Trinidad as well. Maybe not to the same level, but it's happening there also. And I know they have multiple factors there with Trinidad as well. And so the Caribbean's just got to be careful. I think this week or last week as well, I saw Gonzalez talking about the Caribbean bubble. Now, you know my views on that. I think 4 weeks too late. I think the bubble should have been happening amongst ourselves before we let in people from outside.
Yeah.
That's just my take. I think he's too late with the bubble thing.
The bubble should have been established when CPL was being played. We might have been able to stimulate a little bit of the economy, but now that the cricket is finished and COVID is starting to take root again, I think we've missed the opportunity with the bubble. But it is still a good idea.
Yeah, you can still create opportunities. That can come.
The issue is though that you got two of your biggest economies now that having issues
That are gonna
with
go into
COVID
a
and
lockdown.
potentially would be outside the bubble.
Yeah.
And that's a huge issue.
Listen, for sure.
Anyway.
Listen, can I give a shout out to one of our fans? I actually spoke to a fan today, which was awesome. You
Oh,
know?
okay. What's going on?
Yeah, so a lady in Tobago by the name of Glennis Wint Lawrence. So if she's
Hey,
watching this
Glennis.
evening, she said to me, listen, I watch you guys every week.
Oh, there you
Awesome
go.
Okay,
show.
well, there you go.
So I said that I'll give her a shout out this week. Awesome. So thank you so much, Glennis, for taking my call today. I really
Hey,
appreciate
Glennis.
it. Yeah, man.
How you doing? All right.
So
Let's
who
get
we
to
got in the living room this week, man?
Well, couple episodes ago, we spoke about what was going on in Cabot in St. Lucia, with the Cabot investment there in St. Lucia, and
Remember that?
we
Yeah.
thought there's a wider conversation because when you
Oh,
think
yeah.
about it, there's a similar thing in Barbados. You look across in Antigua, there's Yeda. You can go right across the region and find these developments of foreign investments that on the surface seem okay, but I think. Well, I say on the surface, but to be honest, we've been dealing with this for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This isn't just a new phenomenon here. We've been dealing with this for a while. And I thought this is not just a Barbados thing. It's not just a St. Lucia thing or an Antigua thing. This is a Caribbean conversation. And I thought that, we got to get our platform and get our Caribbean people talking about what's
Yes.
happening. So today we got Martin from Antigua. We have Annalie from Barbados. And Akim is having a bit of connectivity issues from St. Lucia, although he's went back to Canada. So there you go. See the connectivity issues, not just about us here in the Caribbean, because he was going back to Canada, but he's having issues there. But hopefully he might be able to join us in a few. And we're just going to have that Caribbean discussion, what are we paying for development?
Yeah, yeah, and it's a good time to have it as well because for as long as I've been alive, we've been talking about restrictions and being hemmed in, and what's happening to our land, and it's very emotive, and I'm sure it probably will get so today as well. But it's a good time to have the conversation.
I think so. And just to give a little bit of context here, listen to this for a little bit.
Tune.
Gabberts, man.
What year was that? What year was that, Carbon? I know you know these years. That was
I think that's 83.
83, 84.
I know somebody will correct me. In the
Somebody,
comments.
yeah, 83, 84. That would tell you that protest was in St. Lucia this year.
There you go.
That was in St. Lucia this year, and the song is still as relevant then as it
Absolutely.
is today.
As it is now.
And
Yeah.
obviously, Gabby wrote it on the situation in Barbados. That's
Yeah.
St. Lucia, and the song is still very much relevant.
Yes.
So that's why we need to have this conversation, and we should have a lot more of them going forward. So I'll bring in Annalie and Martin, and hopefully, we get Akim joining us a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, man.
How we doing, guys?
Hello, how are you?
Yeah, we're doing good. We're doing good. Thank you.
Doing good. Doing good. You all smells there, Annalie. You like that music?
I do very much. It was nice to see it being played in another Caribbean country in that context.
Wow.
And I understand it comes up across the region quite often, actually. Over the last few years, this song is played whenever dealing with this situation. It's just interesting to see it being done in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, it's an anthem, right? It's an anthem.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
An activist anthem.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so Avril asking if they did that during the pandemic. But yes, Avril, sometimes some things are mean a lot to people, and sometimes they risk it and they go do what they need to do. So I hope they all be safe, and I hope everyone was okay. But they felt the need to protest, so they did.
Yeah.
So let's introduce yourself here a minute, Annalie, to the audience here with us this evening. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are.
Okay, thanks, Mark, and thank you all for having me be part of this session. So, I'm currently in St. George in Barbados. I work as a visual artist and a cultural activist and a writer. I have a studio that is on a working dairy farm in St. George. And I guess I'm part of this conversation today because of work that's addressing some of these kinds of issues like Gabby's song has just brought up, and very passionate about these issues. I spent my morning in Carlisle Bay, and I've had my requisite Julie Mango and had my saltwater healing.
Showing off on me there, man.
That sounds
Brown
delightful,
Beach.
Annalise. Very pleased for you.
Yeah, so yeah.
Just 1 minute, Annalie. Just 1 minute. Now, you said St. George. I grew up in St. George, and I know St. George has no sea. But you have a fan or something there near you.
Oh, right. Okay. Let me.
Because I want people to hear you absolutely, Chris. I come from
Okay.
St. George, man. I know you're going to keep your fan on all the time.
Well, we got a lot of mosquitoes in St. George.
You mosquitoes.
So.
Understandable.
Okay, my apologies. I just wanted to make sure people can hear you absolutely
Right,
crystal
okay.
clear. So thank you. St. George, Barbados artist. That's where we got to.
Right. Yes. And I was just saying that I spent the morning going down to Carlisle Bay or Browns Beach. It's a kind of a ritual that I have at the weekend. I call it saltwater healing. And it is a practice that allows me to then face the week ahead and clears all the cobwebs out of the brain. And yeah, the beaches are just such an important part of my growing up, and I think an important part of life for many Barbadians. And my Holy Communion is in mango season, having a mango in the sea. Like there's just nothing that beats that.
You really know how to come on here and upset me.
I understand.
What time in the morning you go down, Annalise?
Well, when they lifted the restrictions during COVID, we were allowed to go between 6 and 9. So I was usually there at 6. But I tend to go, in the morning around 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock before it's too hot. And I walk a lot. So I've done my 7.5K walk this morning and had my swim and my mango. So I'm good to go.
Well, all right. You hold tight there for a minute.
Yeah, good memories for me as well. I used to get up with my
man.
mum at 4 o'clock in the morning and walk down to Brandon's.
Oh,
Tongue man,
nice.
tongue man.
Tongue man, yeah, he's a
Down
tongue
in
man.
town. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
He's oysters, man. Oysters is do it for me.
Yeah.
So listen, Martin, good afternoon. How are you, man?
Good afternoon, Mark, Philip, Andre, Anne-Marie, and Anne-Marie.
Hey, Martin.
Pardon me. I'm well.
Good.
I've had my walk to
same thing
where
again.
I'm located. What's the same thing again? Fans. Oh, fans.
Tell us where you are. Tell us where you are and how you're doing and so forth.
I'm in a little village in Antigua, which most Antiguans don't know exists, called Sorcolt. It's just behind a larger village called John Hughes, and it's kind of on the edge of what we call the rainforest.
Oh, wow.
On the
Okay.
edge of the
So
rainforest.
I'm what we call rainforest.
Okay.
Okay.
Which
I was
interestingly
quite intrigued by that. A rainforest in Antigua.
In Antigua?
I didn't know that.
Well, especially because that can segue straight into that colonialism that you were talking about earlier. The colonialists pitched up, they chopped down all the wonderful trees and left us with nothing.
Right.
That'll cut today's conversation, I guess. 'Cause we
Straight
got
into
used
it
to
there, Martin.
Okay. Welcome.
And I was, thank you. I was, it's a topic that I get quickly into, and I'm really pleased to see that St. Lucia has taken some leaves, probably not out of intention, from Extinction Rebellion's activities of making protest fun and disruptive, and obviously all-inclusive. And I think that's something that we, certainly in Antigua and probably the Caribbean as a whole, need to get smart to, is how do we protest? How do we
Okay,
make our voices heard besides just at the polls?
Fascinating.
Before you go to
Interesting.
protest, Martin, let's
Right.
just pull this back.
Let's get back. Let's pull back.
Don't go into the forest yet.
We're going there, right? We're going there.
He diving in the rabbit hole there.
just come back here for a minute.
We still at the beach. We still at the beach.
And in Antigua, the beach is just the beginning, so...
Indeed.
let's understand the context within which you're speaking, Martin. What's happening
Yeah.
in Antigua?
What's happening in Antigua?
Yeah.
There's a lot happening in Antigua. I think we've successfully done well with the COVID thing. We don't have any active cases to my knowledge at the moment, and we only had 3 deaths, which was seemingly a long time ago, back
Long time
in
ago.
March and April.
Yeah.
It's been an amazing year. 2020, clarity of vision. It's really shown a lot. What's happening in Antigua? We've got the YIDA project, which Andre mentioned earlier, which is meant to be a $2 billion project, but actually in US dollars, it's 740, not UC dollars, 2 billion. We have a new administration, which is not so new anymore, the Gaston Brown-led Antigua Barbuda Labour Party. And we have the blaming of the United People's Party, of Progressive Party, I can't remember which it is, on all the ills of the country. The blame's still happening today. We've got some exciting, good projects build, but there seems to be more build than is actually really happening. And the ones that are happening are controversial.
Yeah. So let's delve in. Let's dive in now. Delve into YIDA for a little bit. Annalie, we're going to come across to you in a second.
Yeah, no, I want to hear.
Tell me a little bit about YIDA, because I feel this is one that guys across the region may not know about thus far. So tell me about that Chinese investment.
It's interesting you phrase it in that way, Andre, because YIDA was billed as this big company, $2 billion invested over 10 years, and so forth. When you start to look at YIDA, I think these days when people look at a company, the first thing we do is reach out to the internet.
Yes.
So with that in mind, go to yidainvest.com and you'll see a website that I came across in 2014 when this whole thing started happening.
Yeah.
And that website has not changed since then.
Since then.
That's
Yep.
6 years ago.
6 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
It's a communist party thing.
any progressive big company would have changed a couple of things on their site by then.
Yes, true.
So, you look at it and you're like, this is a little bit clumsy and awkward for a progressive company that's investing 740,000, million US dollars in an area that borders the marine management area. It's all happening up in the northeast of Antigua. The northeast marine management area, kind of as it suggests, is a managed area, or meant to be. It came about as part of an project with funding from, there you go, with funding from the EU, CARICOM, OECS, and so forth. And lands themselves were purchased from the Stanford liquidators, because we're probably familiar with the Stanford Ponzi scheme that ended up with a...
Oh, Alan Stanford?
Yeah, they bought the land from Stanford at a 68 million, I think it was, they paid for it.
Wow.
As I recall from the liquidators reported 60 million, and the levies for the purchase and so on, Prime Minister, who's also the Minister of Finance, chose to waive them. It was in excess of $6 million US, just to waive. And a big project, a new administration, and with fear and trepidation, I was going, okay, let's give these folks a chance, because we're in a new time of change. And this is in early 2015, because at that time it was just talk. It seems that YIDA actually purchased the land in October time, 2014. That was when the waiver happened. Nothing was happening until we get to Thanksgiving week 2015. A week prior, Antigua its first Environmental Management and Protection Act 2015. Hundreds of pages long, a big read, and you read it and you go, wow, we're good to go. This is all going to be good. These guys are going to do it right, because our Prime Minister has reassured us they were going to do it right. So the environmental impact assessment, which I think certainly in Antigua is seen as an impediment to growth, development.
Sounds familiar.
When you really look at it, It's a promise to be kept via the Rio Conventions. So without boring everybody, the Rio Conventions gave us the Convention on Biodiversity, the United Nations Framework of Climate Change, and the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. All things that have serious social and cultural impact and society and cultural impact those subjects equally. So an environmental impact assessment, what is it really? It is a document or investigation that should look into the economic, social, and logical impact of the proposed project before any decision is made.
Yeah.
So clearly it's a document and a report that should inform the decisions, i.e. the permitting process of any development.
Okay.
Who performs that? Who performs that review?
Yeah, he was getting some connectivity issues. I can
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah, yeah, he
I
is.
can see that happening. Annalie, what about yourself in Barbados? And I know you've been pretty active and vocal about some of the developments going on. Any specific one we want to delve into?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple, but the most recent town hall meeting that I attended, which was before the lockdown, was in early January, and this was in relationship to the Hyatt Ziva that was originally the Hyatt Centric.
Yeah.
It then at the town hall meeting, which took place at the boatyard, just at the edge of Bridgetown, going in there just before where the Hyatt is supposed to be built. And it's so this is a hotel that is going to be 10 to 18 floors. There are going to be 380 hotel rooms, 40 condominiums. The investment is something like just under $200 million, and it's in the UNESCO World Heritage Site area. So it's part of that site. It does include adjoining warehouses, which have been demolished to make room for the hotel.
Warehouses of some historical significance.
Yes, yeah, because they're actually listed on the list of buildings for the UNESCO World Heritage Site. And one of the questions at the town hall meeting was, does that impact our listing as a UNESCO World Heritage Site if you remove these warehouses? But they've been removed, they've been demolished.
And who owned those warehouses?
Right.
Were they state owned or privately owned?
No, that was privately owned.
And how were they compensated?
They were compensated at the value of the property. I mean, Mrs. Ram, who she's referred to, she and her husband were at the town hall meeting, and they were making complaints about the value, but apparently the valuation was fair, and they have been compensated. I mean, there was somebody on the panel representing Heritage, and she said that they would do an archaeological dig once the building was demolished. But I think, as there were a couple of representatives from the National Trust who were saying, surely the goal of listing these buildings is not to demolish them in the first place, and then do dig.
They did say that was the goal.
I mean, I drove by this morning, and so it's the buildings are gone, and I don't know when this dig is happening. I haven't heard anything in the press about that. But also included in the plan are these floating cabanas. So there would be this 18-story tent, different buildings, some from 10 stories to 18 stories. And then there would be these 4 floating cabanas. And of course, if you have several hundred rooms, you need to have chairs and beach chairs and umbrellas to accommodate these people staying in these 380 rooms and 40 condominiums. So what in essence is left is this strip of sand that runs between these floating cabanas and the chairs and umbrellas in the hotel. And, this was, something of concern to me because it's also a turtle nesting site. The flora and the fauna are going to be implicated and affected by the construction. And, I don't think it's the only hotel planned for that area. That's like for me, that's like sacred land. This is like a pressure relief valve for Barbadians, especially those who live in the area of Bridgetown.
Yeah. Because it's one of the
And
few open
You can
windows
just
to the
walk
sea,
off
as
and
it
walk
were.
onto the beach.
yeah,
That's there, isn't it? I
yeah,
mean,
it is one of the few, and I think it's a very, historic. It has just a lot of resonance for Barbadians, and Barbados has a very particular history. This is a beach where all Barbadians feel welcomed,
Yes.
and I've been thinking a lot during the COVID moment that my experience on the beach has changed quite profoundly during COVID
Oh,
because, of course,
really?
How so?
Oh
our
yeah.
Tell us more.
well,
Yeah.
our tourist economy has pretty much ground to a halt,
Yeah.
and that means that who we're seeing on the beach are locals.
Great.
And my experience of being on the beach outside of the tourist economy makes it feel like it's less of a transactional space. And I'm seeing more Barbadian families and people playing, you
Cricket.
know, cricket and football, and kids are there, and they're not hundreds of umbrellas and beach chairs, and it just feels like we're in our own space. Now, I'm not anti-development, I'm not anti-tourism, but I do feel there needs to be a balance. It's just that there's been a very marked difference being on the beach without so many tourists, and it feels very different. And I work as an artist, and so I think about these things. I'm not a politician, I'm not an economist. I think about these things with a different lens, and my sense is that to be fully human, we have to engage with the natural environment.
Absolutely.
Part of our engagement with the natural environment allows us to be fully human. And if we remove the possibility for Barbadians to engage with the natural environment, it reduces our full humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we just continue putting hotels on all of these incredible beaches, even though the architect for the Hyatt Ziva at the town hall meeting said that we would be welcome to run on that strip of land.
Thank
What do
you.
you mean?
He giving us permission.
So we can run on it before?
It made me very cross because it
Wow.
was at that point when I felt that I wanted to make a statement at the meeting to say that I felt that strip of land basically would be colonized
Yeah.
by the hotel, and we have a history of colonization,
Of course.
and I feel that even there are also issues of race and class that come into these conversations. So even somebody that looks like me may not be questioned if I'm walking on that part of the beach. It may be that a number of Black Barbadians may not feel welcomed or may not, may just feel awkward in that kind of a space. And I just think that we need to think about this because there are so many beaches that are just in front of hotels. And so it's not that we can't physically get onto the beach. That is not the issue. We can physically get on the beach. It's just whether or not we want to have all of our beaches be controlled by a hotel space and an environment where it's just tourist, and that there aren't enough spaces for local people to feel that's my beach. That's my beach, and I want to keep that as my beach. And those spaces, I know how they feed my spirit and my soul. And if at the end of the week I'm exhausted, I can go into the sea. It's what I call saltwater healing. And I feel rejuvenated in a way that nothing else makes me feel rejuvenated. And so it's why I feel very passionate about it, because we've lost most of our windows to the sea. And I think that we haven't had the conversation yet about what the tourist economy is going to look like post-COVID. And we don't know whether, these all-inclusive 18-story hotels, if that's the right thing to do.
And they need to be part of that,
and I feel there needs to be this pivot, and the pivot isn't quite happening.
Yeah, well, it's almost like it's like we were saying the bubble is too late earlier, and we have a real opportune moment here. But it just feels as though we are just waiting to get back to what has been paused. And let me ask you about Bridgetown, because as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the assumptions made around the development that you are referring to. And I was reading recently that Bridgetown is a dying city, that sadly the footfall is very, very low, and very few people go there because services have been decentralized and have moved out to other areas. But does that then test the assumption around what we are selling to investors? You know, this hotel that's going to be in the heart of a thriving city, actually it is not a thriving city.
It's not a thriving city, and it's not a thriving city right now. You know, because we are at close to 40% unemployment. And there are companies that are closing and are on the edge of closing. So it's not a thriving city. And so if you're going to put a hotel there, I think one of the arguments was, why turn it into an all-inclusive where you're, you know, why not try and create more opportunities and make the city become more alive? And so, I mean, it just, the whole world is different in the last several months. Everything has changed, and it feels like these conversations need to change to adapt to that environment. But the developer said that the building was going ahead regardless of COVID, and that this construction work would bring employment, and you know, and that this would absolutely move forward. But you know, I think even if you look at things like turtle nesting, you know, last year, I think after the government was in just for a short period of time, leading up to Kadooment and Crop Over, there was going to be a big fet on Drill Hall, and the new Ministry of Blue Economy, they actually stopped it because Drill Hall is a major turtle nesting site.
It is.
And they were saying they couldn't really support having like 1,000 people on that beach for a fet, and it would need. And I was so impressed. So it's possible for us to have this conversation. And for us to think outside the box. And it was so impressive that literally on, I think the day before this fet was to happen, you know, something changed, and the, you know, event planners, you know, something else was going to happen. But there was this consciousness about the value of the environment, and the fact that locals and tourists come to see turtles hatch and they come back. And, you know, we need to think about that more, I think.
Absolutely.
Martin, I don't know if you can hear us, but so Antigua, the Yida project is one, you know, the only Caribbean island so far. It's part of the whole One Belt, One Road Chinese, a quote unquote investment initiative. I call it a strategy to kind of take over everywhere else around the world that they can, potentially. It's over like 2,000 acres. They're able to repatriate about 90% of their profits. You know, it's factories, it's homes, it's, you know, that kind of stuff. How are Antiguans feeling about this?
Most Antiguans I've spoken to are not in agreement with it, but I don't hear or see any real resistance. A lot of what I refer to as bumping your gums about the whole thing, which, you know, we have an astute and erudite prime minister, and he's dealing with that sort of information and discord. The problem is, you know, back to this environmental impact assessment situation. We were served up something that was a updated version of the 20-year-old one that is already in existence. You can't update those things. They're living documents that have a 5-year lifespan in the story. And,
true.
you know, I think it's really pertinent that, you know, we've got this COVID times happening. Back in 2015, when this whole thing was going down, we had the financing for sustainable development, the Addis Accord. Then you had the agreement on the Sustainable Development Goals 2030, and then you had the cracker, the Paris Agreement. And I think most of our countries signed up to all those things
not understand.
with not, as you quite certainly say, not quite understanding what it really meant.
Yeah.
And I think we as a citizenry don't really understand how we need to hold our... I refrain from saying politicians, because politicians can be in power or out of power, but our ministers of government and the cabinet, the executive of government.
But
how do we hold them accountable?
But you say that politicians, the language when you listen to some of the presentation from the Yida group,
I've got it here. I'm going to play it in a second because I wanted to get there too.
Because that was quite interesting.
I wonder which one you got.
Yeah, this is one of the most. I'm only going to play a few seconds, but straight away you're going to hear all the issues that I have with it, and everyone's going to hear it as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. More importantly, I'd like to welcome the proud supporters, including ourselves, of the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party. The bright Antiguan sun is fully out today to shine on us and our project. And I say this with seriousness because over the course of this week, many have asked us, what is our vision for this project? What are we going to do to bring Antigua to the next level? In short, we are creating a new development that will achieve the following objectives. One, unite our country in strength and in unison, underpinned by real economic growth and development inside and outside of the Antigua Special Economic Zone. Two, allow each individual and business in Antigua to benefit from job creation and revenue growth, not just for the investors. Three, build a new global destination that attracts visitors and for them to explore the real Antigua and Barbuda, not just stay within the resort. Four, preserve and upgrade the natural environment to ensure eco-green sustainable development. Five, provide a venue where every family can celebrate their victories, large and small, professional and personal. And lastly, in 5, 10, and more years, when we look back, under the leadership of the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party, we will be proud of the economic powerhouse Antigua has become.
Annalie, I saw your face there, couldn't believe it.
Really condescending, though.
Man, so disingenuous.
And there are many other unbelievable clips
Not just
like that.
disingenuous, but to blatantly associate yourself with the Antigua and Barbuda
single
Labour Party.
Yeah.
You make yourself, you got to ask questions. You know,
course.
are you interfering with elections in the Caribbean, with governments in the Caribbean to serve your own purposes? Is this being allowed? You know, are people asking Brown what's going on and why this thing? It's just crazy. When I heard that, I almost couldn't believe it. I'm like, who does this guy think he is?
Antigua don't want parties yet.
Exactly.
It could just be the culture that they come from as well.
They don't know.
they're
As
just
long as this is government, this is
superimposing that.
government.
Yeah.
But it's also the culture that we allow them to bring to our shores as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because,
Agreed, yeah.
you know, if you're managing your country properly, you're having this investment, you would speak to them about what they say, how they say it.
Absolutely.
Even if it's to just say, look, we need to make the appearances of X. But for him to say that means he has the confidence to say it, you know, and for him not to be checked on it by anyone from the Labour Party means that there's a tie-up there that needs to be explored. I'm just saying it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Andrea, I think you hit a key point there. You obviously haven't seen the video that I shot, which is not good, but the following day to that speech, Yida was a sponsor for the Antigua Sailing Week, and it was the prize giving night. So you can imagine. And the very same gentleman who is at the time he was vice president of Yida, he's no longer involved in Yida. And in his speech, he basically talked about rising from the ashes and phoenixes this, and if you don't like it, that's what you're going to be. And I'm putting it politely, he also apologized. He had to say this because he's been drinking since 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Oh, what? I mean, you know, these are the kind of investors that have come to this country.
Wow.
And like Annalie, I'm not against development, but I'm really dead set against dumb development. And when we look at, you know, the amazing architecture and engineering knowledge that we as humanity have today, there's a lot of really smart development that could happen, but we can't be running these business models of the 90s and the early 2000s because they failed. And COVID is such an amazing lesson on so many levels. Many levels. And we didn't see it coming. Yeah, right.
But it will only benefit those who seize the moment and recognize the importance of what we need to be doing in this moment and where we need to pivot.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to just jump in and say that I think part of the issue is that the conversation is generally controlled by a corporate voice. And that's part of the challenge. How do you have other ideas and other ways to have these kinds of discussions? I mean, when we had the town hall meeting here, the fact is that the developers are the people who pay for the environmental impact assessment. So even though the state requires that the EIAs have to happen, it's the developers that are paying for it. And then when you have these town hall meetings, they're really set up as, it's something that has to be done, it's required, but the conversation is not really set up to be meaningful. So which voices are being heard with all of, everything that, that Martin is saying as well, which voices are being heard in these public fora?
But Annalie, the developer should provide an environmental impact assessment. But what then needs to happen is how that EIA is scrutinized.
Right.
And perhaps
Correct.
that is the issue in the Caribbean, where the developer might be presenting a fait accompli, but there is no scrutiny of what they are intending to do with their development and the questions, the difficult questions that they need to answer. That perhaps is where the gap is.
Yeah.
The assessment is just a tick box.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's not
Is
really.
there,
Yeah.
is there issue or resources to do that scrutiny?
Well, I mean, I was told by one of the financial advisors to the current administration that the town and country planning or the urban planning office is very strong and that they will be assessing all of these EIAs and making their recommendations. But, we're also aware that we have just come out of the impact of a global economic recession in 2008, and just having gone through the economic recovery program, which was beginning to yield results at the beginning of this year, COVID has hit. And so there is profound pressure on this on the state to, I guess, endorse projects like these. It just feels like there was a sense that there wasn't very much new when we went to the town hall meeting in terms of new thinking around development. I mean, just in terms of managing wastewater, and questions about, well, how much water is this hotel going to use and where is it coming from? Well, it's coming from where everybody else is getting water from. They're not required to put in a desal plant. And now this is within a context of many people in Barbados not having access to water from St. Joseph and, different
John,
parishes, St. John. So why are you not being required to invest and upgrade our capacity for things like that? Why is that hotel being required to tap into the Bridgetown sewage treatment plant when there's already, it's not functioning at capacity or there are issues? Why are you saying at the town hall meeting that that hotel will have zero impact on traffic?
That's impossible.
Yeah.
How is this the case, right?
Absolute rubbish.
It just kind
That's
of like
impossible.
every question that came up, it just seemed as though there was no issue. They had done the homework, and but it wasn't a design that felt forward thinking within the context of us living in the Anthropocene moment on a small island. The reality of the sixth extinction is glaringly obvious for all of us. We can't afford to put up buildings unless we are going to do it with all of that in mind.
Let me put on another hat for a moment, Andy. Suppose you were going to build 6 houses on a corner here where I live in England, right? Of course, we will want to see a transport impact assessment. And of course, there's always going to be an impact on traffic. So if you're going to build a hotel with 380 rooms that people need to come from the airport to get to or come from the port to get to, it is only obvious.
And companies need to service.
Exactly. It is only obvious that there's going to be an impact on traffic. It's ridiculous to say there will be none.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Nothing is built with zero impact.
Yeah.
The thing that really gets me with the Cabot, as well as the Hyatt one, and even the Yida project in Antigua as well, is we spend a lot of time for Barbados as well. Prime Minister Motley, when she was head of CARICOM, spent a lot of time going to the United Nations, speaking on climate change and speaking on rising sea levels and sustainable development, and pretty much chastising the rest of the world about they're not caring about what's happening to small
Small
island
island
development states.
Yeah.
But then we allow these things with
Reverse is true.
real proper impact assessment to happen. In case of Yida, in the case of Barbados and in St. Lucia, and I'm sure other places across the region, we allow them to build on the seaside rather than on the land side. You go anywhere around the world, Miami, Turkey, big, you would realize the hotel is on one side of the road, the beach is on the other side of the road. You get there. For whatever reason in the Caribbean, we allow these companies to come, and we have no teeth really in the way, or no
Yeah.
bravery in the way how we negotiate these things, and we say we allow them to do it. And so you wonder, can we really speak about sustainable development and climate change with any real authority,
If we're not
or,
gonna lead the discussion.
if we're not going to lead it in the way how we do our own internal development?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just pumping the guns, as what Martin called it.
I don't think I did, but Andre, I think you hit an excellent point, because our Prime Minister Gaston Brown, the 2015 Summit on Sustainable Development, addressed the General Assembly of the UN with a speech entitled "We Must Do What We Say," and he's not done anything that we're going to say.
Exactly.
We've got a lovely smoke screen of stuff, but the reality is on the ground, we don't even have in Antigua an appointed, and the appointed is a very important part, not a de facto, an appointed director of the Department of Environment. A chief environmental officer, but guess what? Legislation doesn't have a chief environmental officer in it anymore. And yet the Green Climate Fund has advanced us a grant of $32.7 million to create hurricane resilient public buildings. Now, I'm not saying that isn't needed, but it's on the wrong premise. And it's a premise that I see as a layperson as a fraud. Pure and
Martin,
simple. And,
Martin, do you think?
Mark was, yes.
Do you think there's an issue with governance around how how
Yes.
these decisions are made, particularly with the amount of power that is often vested in the prime ministers of the region?
Mark, I think the very point that you make, governance is the key card to this whole thing, because political parties come and go, government remains. And the politicians are only the executive level of the government. And unfortunately, I don't know about Barbados, St. Lucia, etc. I can only really speak for Antigua. I think that the governance system has been so corrupted and perverted that we need some really big systemic change. And the only way that is going to come about is when the society demands it. Doesn't ask for it, demands it. And Philip was saying earlier about who scrutinizes the environmental impact assessments and so on, and Lee was making a similar point. I think it's interesting that we're seeing this local governance issue coming slightly higher and higher in the discourse of high people talking about these things. And, these documents, they're public, but to get a copy of them or state of them, you would have thought they were state secrets. But it has my right to walk into the Development Control Authority and say, can I have a copy of that, please?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure, Mr. Dudley, that's $20 or whatever. Then it's up to society to scrutinize that document, question it, and hold it accountable for the purpose that it was written. And, one of the reasons that I feel so strongly about this is we've made a pledge to the world. When I say we, Antigua, and collectively the Caribbean region, which should be looked at as one big ecosystem, because the ecology of what Yida is doing is going to affect lobster fisheries up far like Antigua and places like that. And these are the minuity details that people choose to just, don't worry about that. Externality, as the cat would say.
That's an excellent point. And when I looked at the Yeed and reading up about it, one of the things that's going to be part of that project is actually, fisheries, factories to process fish and that kind of stuff. Now, this is real interesting for potentially food security in the Caribbean, because we all know how the Chinese technology, I don't know if anyone has seen the size of their trawlers and what's not as they go about fishing across the world. Now, if you have a fish processing plant in Antigua, and there's no barrier to fishing as you want in the Atlantic Ocean, which is open fishing, then it means that
But even
across
in
the
Antigua,
yeah, I mean, right off the coast of the
sorry to cut you.
Caribbean, if you look at it as a complete ecosystem in the Atlantic Ocean, Chinese trawlers will be out there able to fish day and night, 24/7, 365 days a year.
Yeah.
Why? Because a few minutes or a couple hours away, they've got a factory, which is a de facto, the way how it's looking to me, is actually a Chinese colony within Antigua,
Antigua,
that
yeah.
they can use as their home port. So
Yeah.
it means that the impact where our fishermen going to go is going to impact the food. And when I say fish, not just the livelihoods of the fishermen, but our diet and the food that we have across the region, which will impact the tourism product that
Yeah.
we are allowing to come in.
Trying to offer.
Because then
Yeah.
what are we eating? It's huge implications, the EDA project.
But Andre, you know, they are the Chinese are already fishing in our waters. Because we
Yes.
don't fish, we don't police our waters very well, and there's a whole pile of them down in Trinidad getting nice and cheap fuel, and they are in our waters. And one of the
Yeah.
things that's curious about Antigua is we have a very, very large economic exclusive economic zone, 110,000 square kilometers. That's a
Yes.
pile of water, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And within there's an excess of, I believe, 150 fish attracting devices from the French islands. So the Frenchies between St. Bart's, Guadeloupe, and Dominica are coming and teaching all our fish in the first place.
Exactly.
And the Coast Guard, in one of the Prime Minister's budget speeches, I think it was 2016 or 17, he thought it would be good that the Coast Guard was equipped to go fishing. Go
It's
figure
just-
that one.
It's just crazy. Just a quick pause. Hey guys, as usual, this is Week Global in the living room. You know, we have these conversations every week, and we just want to thank Martin and Annalie for joining us today. Hopefully, Akem is going to join us shortly as well if he gets his interconnectivity sorted out. But hit share, get other people into the conversation. Let's hear your stories as well. Feel free to jump into the comments. We'll get as much of them up on the screen as possible and answer any questions or deal with any observations that you have as well. For whatever reason, but guys, my camera keep coming. I don't know what's happening there, but let's hope let's hope it's not impacting. Let's hope it's not impacting anything.
I thought you were just blinking.
Not at all. Not at all.
That point
Yeah.
that Martin was just making about, you know, and yourself, Andre. This is why this is a Caribbean conversation, because the threat of our ecosystem, our food, and how we live in the future is really where people need to recognize these things and not think that this is, it's just something happening in Antigua or it's just something happening in St. Lucia. You know, if we don't pay attention before we know it, the Caribbean is suddenly going to be so dependent more
The challenge though
on the
is-
east.
The challenge
It is.
paying
I mean,
attention
it is. You know, we import in Barbados over 80% of what we eat,
yeah.
right? So
Antigua similarly.
we mentioned, you know, yesterday I was saying that when Dorian hit the Bahamas, Mia Motley had said if it had hit Miami in that way, Caribbean economies would have been really in trouble because that's our port of entry.
Yeah.
Everything comes through Miami into the Caribbean. So when you think about the way that COVID has impacted Barbados, you know, the supermarket shelves weren't empty, but they weren't as robust as they used to be because we did not have on the shelves what we were accustomed to having. I mean, we're importing fruit and vegetables. We're not, and we cannot be self-sufficient, but we could certainly do better than we have. And there has been a recent attempt at securing several hundred acres to grow food. But then, of course, there's the issues of radial larceny and this expansive and growing monkey population that is wreaking havoc on the work that farmers are doing. So these are not simple issues, but this issue of food sovereignty is also one of security, right? I mean, if you can't feed yourself, that's a real problem.
Trouble.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you know, on the subject of food, there's different ways of producing good quality food these days. You know, agriculture has gone through a big technical boom. I mean, one of the things that I'm instantly thinking of is the seawater greenhouse. You don't need any big supplies of fresh water, and you've got organic food that has been grown in a greenhouse. So you don't need to be using any insecticides. You don't need to be using any herbicides. Good, clean food. What's wrong with that? But instead, we see farmers toiling in the blazing hot sun. And I think we've all done a little bit of backyard gardening in the last 6 months and have a profoundly different respect for farmers. They're amazing
Absolutely.
people, and I can understand why they throw the pesticides. But then when you look at full cost accounting, which is something which economists will not do, we find it's costing in healthcare because people are getting cancers from all these chemicals, and the ecosystems of soils are being destroyed and so forth. And one of the things that I think is curious is that the economy thinks it's the most important thing, when actually it's the ecology which is the most important thing. No ecology,
Absolutely.
you ain't got an economy.
Yeah.
And people don't understand this.
I mean, I wanted to add two points to something that you had raised, Martin. One about the ecology. I mean, I don't know if a lot of maybe if you have a lot of UK-based listeners, but when we think about turtles, I'm not sure if people realize how sophisticated they are. They circumnavigate the globe, and they come back to the beach where they were born. Now, if the marine environment in that beach where they were born has been severely altered, they may attempt to give birth, but then after 2 or 3 times, they go back out to sea and they abort. And it's just out of maybe, I don't know, 100 eggs, 1 or 2 may reach maturity. So as we are damaging these coastal environments and making it more and more difficult for turtles to nest on beaches where buildings are maybe going and claiming up to the high tide water mark, that's a huge impact that impacts our ecology.
True.
And the other thing I wanted to mention,
about one species.
Absolutely. When Martin, you were talking about, that citizens need to be active, and I really believe in this whole idea of active citizenry. But it feels increasingly that there isn't a room for their voice to be heard, because we had another beach. There's a beach in Barbados called Accra, and there was a town hall meeting about an expanded development on the Blue Horizon Hotel. And it was a really incredible meeting. Hundreds of people came out. The developers were, I think, really thrown off guard. We had powerful presentations from Gabby and other people who lived in the area. And then there was a petition of 5,000 signatures, a document of 250 pages that was printed and delivered to the planning unit at the Town and Country Planning Office to oppose the construction of a restaurant that would be on the seaside on Accra Beach, opposite Blue Horizon Hotel.
Yeah.
And nobody wants that to be there because it's such an important beach. And that seems to have had no impact. So, Bajans came out.
The legal case.
And, well, the thing about developing a legal case is finding the funds to do that, right? Because you are up against... You're up against a lot. You're up against big money developers.
The developers know it.
And the state, right? So if the mechanisms that are put in place for citizens to voice their concerns and to do a petition, and you do that and you submit it and it's still not being heard, people are scrunting. Like, how many people can actually afford to do that legal case and to,
Very few.
It's interesting you brought that up, because I was when we were talking about being attentive to and having these things being brought to our attention, being aware of the stuff that's going on around us as well. I was saying, well, awareness isn't enough. It's also, how do you engage, and where is the room for activism? So when you were telling that story, I was hoping that the outcome was something else. But is it just a matter of money, or is there something else underlying that stops our voice from having real significant impact on these types of decisions and developments?
I mean, part of it obviously is, I think, a difficulty of being able to access the finance and to get a legal team who's willing to do that. But I also feel that the conversations are told through a very particular lens. So it is a corporate voice and it's a state voice
Okay.
and it's about jobs and economy.
Yes.
And I don't feel like we have matured enough to have these
Look at
other
the wider picture.
conversations, you know, because it really, there were some, I left that meeting about the Accra, the Blue Horizon development, feeling so proud that
Right.
so many Barbadians had come out and were so articulate and respectful and powerful. I mean, it was just an amazing evening. And I really felt that,
The wisdom of the
that maybe
crowd.
we had a chance, you know? But then to know that that 250-page document with 500 signatures was delivered and it doesn't, and it's one of the last openings to the sea, there is a philosophical, a profound difference in terms of how we see things.
Yeah.
Right. So this
Yeah.
is one of the challenges. So maybe we're having a conversation here about the ecology and the environment and a kind of quality of life and what it means to be fully human in a natural environment. And that's just not equating in some of the offices where those decisions are made.
Yeah.
Are actually made.
Uh,
Yeah.
but Annalie, I think we need to give people an understanding of what it takes actually to be an activist. And you know, some of the work that you have done around this area is admirable. And I think we can probably have a look at some of that actually, because you have taken a stance that I think is really important for people to see and recognize.
Yeah, no, I agree. Before we look at that, I saw Katie's point there, and that's a good point we want to come back to, because you feel the people we elect should be on our sides
Should be.
Yeah.
and should be balanced enough to look at the financial, the returns of investment from a financial perspective, but also balance that with the quality of life and make sure that they're protecting the rights and the innate rights of the people of the country. And far too often, like you were saying, and it seemed as if the officials and the companies seem to be already on the same page.
They're already together. That's the
Before
point I was
you
getting
have
at.
that,
Yeah.
before you have those meetings, and there's almost nothing that the average person, or or any person actually, could do or say that's going to change
That's going
that.
to change that fact. Yeah.
And that seems to be a real issue.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel that we are asking fundamental questions about the future of tourism, and I don't feel that those town hall meetings are set up for real conversations. It's just not.
No.
So where do we go to have that real conversation? How do we promote that real conversation to happen? And I mean, I feel there's a role for writers and artists and musicians. But they've spoken. I mean, Gabby has spoken, Kamau has spoken, Lamming has spoken, younger writers who are doing, graphic novels and looking at issues of ecology and, things that are shifting in this sort of Anthropocene moment. We have been speaking, but maybe there isn't enough of a platform for the arts to be seen. Certainly the visual arts, we don't have a National Art Gallery or contemporary art gallery space, even though they've just announced that they found a building for it. So there are limited spaces for that conversation to happen in some ways. And then you need to look at the responsibility of investigative journalism. What role are they playing? And are they actually asking these questions about food sovereignty?
Very good.
No.
And we got a friend there, Rhoda Barath, who I know is watching.
Yeah,
Rhoda,
yeah.
we need your voice on a lot of these issues, huh?
Yeah.
We need
And
your voice.
I want to also, Annalie, whether there is now a need for a revisiting of some of the legislation in this area, because if people who are to be consulted on developments feels as though they're being left out and being given a fait accompli to sign, that's not consultation. That's not engagement. And it feels to me as though the legislation is probably already there, but it is very weak in the way it's being enacted
not being acted on.
across the region. People are being, brought the final designs and everything when there's no opportunity to influence it.
I agree.
And I think also a limited imagination in the corporate sector to craft more innovative, sustainable, dynamic, solutions that benefit everybody. I mean, there's I've often quoted Lucy Lepard, who is an American art critic, who's written about tourism and local places, and that question about how can we have a responsible form of tourism where the local doesn't feel like a prostitute and the tourist doesn't feel like a pimp? So that there's not this continuation of an old colonial model of extractive economies, which is what the Caribbean is based on. It is based on that plantation model of extractive economies. I'm not saying that hotels function like plantations, but how
They do.
right? Okay, I'm here and you all are there.
Tourism
So
is
we'll say it for you. We'll say.
Um,
I'll say it for you. They do. They do.
But so how can we look at the tourist model differently so it's not this extractive model and that everybody feels that they're benefiting given this traumatic shift that is happening globally at the moment? Where's the innovative thinking happening?
And I think that's a good point to
I'll tell you where the innovative.
Oh, 1 second, Martin. We'll come back to that. I think that's a good point,
Sure.
and to segue to what Mark was saying and the work that you were doing, because not thinking like that has impacted Bajans, and I'm sure many people across the region in a profoundly adverse way when it comes to access to what should be their birthright, which is to be able to go to the beach. So let's take a look at that.
I grew up bathing in seawater, but nowadays that is bare horror. If I only venture from my seashore, police telling me I can't bathe no more. Jack,
I'm standing on the west coast on the small island of Barbados, situated in the southern Caribbean. The west coast is commonly referred to as the Gold Coast, partly because of the number of five-star hotels situated here. One can pay up to $25,000 US a night plus tax to rent a room on the west coast. These hotels, of course, bring in a lot of foreign exchange and contribute to the large tourist economy. There is, however, a lot of concrete on the Gold Coast, so much so that when you drive along the coastal road, you can hardly see the blue sea because of the sea of construction. The coast is punctuated with blue and white signs that are public beach access points that mark access spaces onto the beach for local population. I thought it would be interesting to measure how many feet of beach access are available to the local population on this most lucrative stretch of 7 miles of the Gold Coast. And that today is my task.
Cause Jack don't want me to bathe on my beach. Jack, tell them to keep me out of reach. Jack, tell them I would never make me grade. They strengthen security and build barricade. That can't happen here in this country. I want Jack to know that the beach belong to we. That can't happen here over my dead body. Tell Jack that I say that the beach belong to we. The beach is mine, I could bathe anytime. Bats Rock, 18 feet, 10 inches. Total available public beach access on 7 miles of the west coast is 142 feet and 3 inches.
I thought that was really good
Wow.
when I watched that, and powerful as well.
Thank you.
Because whenever I go home, even before I left home to come here to live in the UK, it was so annoying, especially if you wanted to go on the west coast and you wanted to go on a particular beach. You had to find an entrance, then you had to walk to find your beach, and very often you were walking past spaces, as you said, in front of hotels where you weren't even made to feel welcome, far less walking through it. So you seemed like you were annoying people. And that was really annoying. So I thought that was a really powerful piece.
Thank you. I mean, so just for, in case some of your viewers don't know, the song that I'm singing very badly is
Beautiful,
taken
lovely.
from
Actually-
Gabby's 1982 hit.
Yeah.
Actually, I think there's a remake in you.
Right, you're being very nice.
I think one coming. I'll back you up, man. I'll back you up.
Right, all right, good. But it was a very important song, you know, Gabby. It was 1982, called Jack.
82,
It was
okay.
originally his response to the Barbados Board of Tourism's legal counsel advising hotel owners that they had the right to extend their property down to the waterfront.
Jack Deere.
And so that video that you've shown, it goes on for 8 minutes, but I'm basically measuring this, the public beach access points on this 7 mile stretch on what they call the Gold Coast, or the, the Platinum Coast. And, some of those blue and white signs are, you have like maybe a 6 foot wide concrete path that you can walk down, and maybe there's garbage or the smell of urine, or
poorly
and
lit.
there's nowhere to park. If you're a woman going with your children in a bassinet or a pram, you can't park there. Who is that beach for? I mean, you need to remember that these South and West Coast areas were originally plantations, most of them, right? And so they have become hotels. And I don't know the last day I've been to bathe on Sandy Lane in front. I'm not going to go and swim in front of Sandy Lane. I feel awkward doing that. I mean, one of the places I go to often in Barbados used to be called Enterprise Beach. It's been kind of renamed Miami Beach, but Accra now has built another hotel, a kind of a sister hotel, not on the
Miami,
beach, but so, and now, before the lockdown, I went down, and I mean, there were just this line of turquoise umbrellas and tourists, and I had like no space. Wow. And it's too much. We're not getting the economy of scale right. There's a tipping point where it's too much, and we need to think about alternatives to the tourist economy, so that when COVID happens, you're not sunk, because almost everything is in that economy. Wow. But our people can't take it, the land can't take it, the coast can't take it, the environment can't take it. It's too much. We need to have innovative ideas. And that, by the way, was, that was like 10 years ago or more that I did that.
Wow.
Again,
so that video, that's not a recent video, that's from...
No, that was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Right. I was going to ask, how do you get your voice out? Who's your audience, and how do you get people to see the stuff that you're doing?
Well, I've been making work for a long time. I came back to Barbados in 1989. Unfortunately, I show most of my work outside of Barbados, because there are not a lot of spaces here to do that. That piece was shown for the first time last year in Barbados. That it's been shown in other places, and it's and there's another piece that I've done called Barbados Just Beyond My Imagination, which is adapted that name. Yes, so Barbados Just Beyond Your Imagination is the Board of Tourism's marketing slogan, and I kind of rejigged that to call it Just Beyond My Imagination, which it basically maps the Caribbean as a golf course. So the sea becomes astroturf, and all of the islands are sand traps locked into the sea of perfectly manicured green grass, and there's this issue of not having enough water. And members are preferred, so this is kind of, this is what has happened with the tourist economy. It's in some ways it's about exclusivity and privilege, and that we continue marketing ourselves as a playground for people from somewhere else. And this is a very dated model. This is not something that is. We're seeing the impact of an almost non-extinct. A non-existent tourist economy at the moment. People are losing jobs, and I really don't want to come across. I understand. I'm not supporting that at all. I just feel that we need something else.
Correct. Martin, you wanted to jump in there and something?
There's so much of what Annalie has said that is so pertinent. The innovative thinking. We already have the innovative thinking. We have Airbnb. which has
Right.
its own set of problems, but those are problems that can be dealt with local
Yeah.
regulation. The
True.
Airbnb model is awesome. And
Yeah. It allows the
Airbnb as a
locals to
company,
participate.
when they did exactly, and the market for tourism, which I'm 54 years old. I've lived in Antigua since 1969. Do the math. It's all my life. I'm tired, and it's not recently. It's not recently. I am so tired that tourism is everybody's business. Tourism first, tourism that, tourism that. Wait,
Yeah.
what about are we that live here? Because if we're happy people,
Give me that one
educated
again.
and so forth, people want to come. I'm doing a little code switch here, you know.
Yeah.
People want to come and spend some time with us because we're happy, we're having some fun, we're culturally developed, etc., etc. And the
Yeah.
culture that, from an Antigua perspective, it seems to be nothing but Bacchanal and Carnival, when culture is actually how we interact with each other. And
Yeah.
this is why
Well
Annalie's
said.
work as an artist, you kind of put yourself down, Annalie, earlier when you were talking about these highfalutin people of economics and accountants and so forth. Your work is just as important as them
Yes.
because
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
human mind is imagery. You bring that
Yes.
imagery to all that
Absolutely.
fancy talk, externalities, this and that and so
Right.
forth.
Yes.
They're obscuring and distracting
Yeah.
the essence of what it is to be human, what it is
Right.
to be part of an ecosystem and part of a community. And when I say community, I'm not talking about just humans, because every
Absolutely.
single living thing on this planet is there
Mm.
for a reason. And if it's not useful to the greater good, it
Mm-hmm.
goes extinct.
Yeah.
What we're
I agree.
having now is because of the Industrial Revolution and mankind,
Yeah.
things are going extinct because of all those plays of the bad side of humanity,
Right.
greed,
Yeah.
avarice, and so forth.
But a
And
lot
it's
of
so
it.
curious. I thought a lot of it.
No, no, sorry, sorry. I was gonna say some of it is the language that we use even about ourselves. The guys have always heard me talk.
Absolutely.
I've always been one to hear whenever we're doing some kind of internal development, whether it be fixing roads or planting trees or whatever. In the same sentence, they always have to say to be enjoyed by locals and tourists alike. And I'm going like, just drop off tourists. It's ours.
Yep.
We're fixing
Exactly,
our roads
locals.
for us to travel. We travel on the roads more than the tourists. We enjoy the spaces more than the tourists. We want to go to the beach more than, just just do that. And I think sometimes the problem with using that language constantly is that we then buy into potentially sometimes being feel less than,
For
when
the
tourists
system.
come, and we put a certain deference towards tourists. So that's why even, Annalie, you go to those town hall meetings and what's not, we talk, but then we kind of already know what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
And then
Kind of
when it
cynicism.
happens, we actually don't retort. We just leave it because we knew
Yeah.
that was always going to
That's gonna
happen.
be the outcome.
But
Yeah.
but I went and said something anyway, and that's the problem when you constantly use that language all the time. As you say, Martin, tourism is our business. Let's play our part. We grew up with that, Mark and Philip. Tourism,
Absolutely.
tourism is our business. Let's play our part.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it just gets into your mentality.
You start to
Yeah.
act
And to your
and
psyche.
believe it and act that
You,
way.
you,
Yeah.
you start to act, believe it, and then you defer to things like the Hyatt happening and just go, well, we've got no choice.
Yep.
That's the only
Yeah.
way.
Here's a
And
curious question. Sorry, the curious question. Which of the countries in the world is the biggest tourism country? Five,
well, the
four,
Caribbean.
three. Country, not region.
Oh,
It's
country.
France. It's
Okay.
France.
Okay.
And the French are not exactly, at the times, the most hospitable people. But
They're not
they
actually.
like their wine, they like their food. I mean, I have no beef with the French, but their food is gorgeous. They got
Yeah.
amazing wines. Their culture is pretty impressive,
It's rich,
and a
yeah.
lot of people gravitate to it. But in the Caribbean, we gravitate to this culture of a country that's less than 200 years old, called America, and has an orange thing for a president. What?
Exactly.
You know?
No, that's a good point.
Fear, we fear the inroads of a country that is thousands of years old, as a civilization in excess of 5,000 years old, that is truly wanting to dominate the world, because it seems that that's what they do, and they've done it before. And somehow we need to stand. You open the show with Barbados becoming a federation and that whole schismism of the Queen being our head of state. What is curious is how Yida has used that and leveraged that to create a credibility.
Yes.
You know, I don't know if you saw the pictures of him at the China Polo Day at the Guards Polo Club. He's wearing shoes that are Union Jack in front of the Queen. Can you imagine the Queen doing that in China? I'll push your head. You know, but no, it's Mr. Yang. It's fine. No. Anyway, yeah, we've got Airbnb. We don't need to be doing these old models of 18-story Hyatts, etc. Let's look inwards. Let's create something for us. You know, we have the amazing digital technology, which, you know, has its negative side without doubt. But let's focus on what we need to, and we want to build, rather than just criticizing what is. Let's build what we want.
Yeah.
You know,
Community of humans.
I think you're absolutely right about Airbnb. You know, these guys know I went across Canada and Finland and Sweden at the beginning of the year exclusively in Airbnb because it works and it feels as though actually, given our hospitality and the way that we are and the experience that we have in hosting, it is a model that can easily be integrated into the Caribbean if the legislation would allow it, because that is where the blocker seems to be at the moment.
I think every business model you have to be
Mark,
careful with, because think of Airbnb in Barcelona. So it was probably about 2 years ago. They were up in arms about Airbnb because it was driving down the prices of properties and making it very difficult.
That was the market. That was market forces.
That's always going to happen in the transition as well.
That's why I say that. And you know, that's why I say that local legislation can look after the negative side of it.
You can do
that is true.
I listened to the podcast. One of the podcasts I listened to is How I Built This by Guy Raz, and he was interviewing one of the co-founders of Airbnb post-COVID, and this is all about resilience and stuff. And what that company did in terms of all its members, let's call them that, was phenomenal. They gave out in excess of $1 billion of support. They had to reduce their staff by 80%. And they didn't feel good about it. I don't think anybody would have felt good about it. But, you know, Airbnb came about through a very extraordinary moment where people decided, well, let's have strangers stay in our living room. How crazy is that? And yes, it's evolved. And again, the big corporate hotel chains have abused that niche market because, guess what? Airbnb books more hotel rooms than the top 3 hotel chains in the world put together. And if governments of the Caribbean can't figure this out, what kind of leaders do we really have? Not inclusive.
Good point.
No, absolutely valid point. And listen, Emily, one of the things I wanted to raise was just this whole issue of fear factor with developers, because this is something that I've come across in work personally, where a few years ago we were dealing with a road scheme here in England, and we went to the local residents with a blank sheet of paper and said, look, you guys design it because we think it's best that you design it. But the risk with doing something like that was phenomenal, because first of all, you don't know what they're going to come up with. You don't know if you can build it, right? But it gained immense credibility because we went to them and said, look, this is the road. You live here, you run your businesses here. What features do you want to see down here? And it's a model that is written all over the place now in books all over the world. Why? Because if you don't listen to local people and try and design for where they are living, you will constantly be repeating this constant cycle of conflict with citizens, developers, governments, because nobody's listening to each other. You know, it is just always this is what we're giving you, take it, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there are 2 things I would say to that. One is there's a great model of that in Barbados at Oistins, the fish market, which was really developed in a very organic way. And that is a legitimate and successful platform for fishermen and hawkers and vendors and people that are cooking and selling food. It is remarkably popular, and it's where locals and tourists go alike, and it's on the terms of the local people that manage that. I mean, some of those little food places there are Zagat rated. I mean, it's such a successful thing. The second thing I would say to that is this issue of community buy-in at the Hyatt Ziva Town Hall meeting, they brought in somebody, I'm trying to remember what they called him. He was like a community representative,
Yeah.
and he fit the bill.
Yeah.
Here was this guy with
Was
locks,
he wearing a suit?
and he
Yeah.
came from that community. And he said that when he spoke to the people in the community, they had light in their eyes about this project. And it was just incredible. I mean, my blood pressure rose because they were able to pay, and he said he was paid by the developers to be the community development person. Now, there are a couple of issues with this.
Oh dear.
That was a terrible turnout. Maybe there were 40 people that came to that town hall meeting a few days into the new year. And the location of the town hall meeting changed a few hours before it took off, right? So there wasn't a whole lot of public announcement around it. And I think that was all very clearly planned. So you come into the boatyard, and here is this elevated stage with, I don't know, 14 people up on the stage in a PowerPoint presentation. And, you know, you're on the beach, it's under the stars, there's sand in your toes, they're giving you non-alcoholic drinks for free, and, you know, we're all happy and lovely. But the thing is that when that is not a very high residential area.
No.
So unlike the Blue Horizon Town Hall meeting, that's a very residential area. And a lot of people came out to that. It was a very diverse group. It included middle class people, working class people. It was a very powerful group. But when you go to a town hall meeting and you have supposed experts sitting on a platform, how many working class people are coming into that environment, or people that are not accustomed to speaking in a public forum? That's an intimidating forum.
Yeah.
Many people do not want to get up and go to the microphone because it's intimidating. So you have to be brave enough to do that. That is not a welcoming space for average people to go, whether or not they're educated. And because you don't then have a huge residential pool of people to draw from to attend this town hall meeting, that community was represented by this one voice who was being paid by the developer to be the community representative and tell us that all the people in the community had light in their eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, really?
Listen, I've learned over the years that you got to go where the people are and take the licks and your scars and just keep going. That's the job. We unfortunately in our professional areas in the Caribbean, we probably don't like to take the licks that are coming our way when people don't agree with our designs or our proposals. But that is part of the job. You just got to take your licks and keep going. That's how it works.
And the thing is, Mark, there were people that got up and said very powerful things. And the panel, there were very few comments that they responded to. Peter Lawrence Thompson was extremely articulate. He spoke about, you know, the last nail in the coffin was that shift from Hyatt centric to Hyatt Ziva. You know, that and we gave feedback. The community gave feedback and said what they wanted. You increased the level of the floors to 18 stories. You turned it into an all-inclusive.
Yeah,
they said nothing.
Yeah, the original proposal was for a new restaurant and guest services under the Centric brand, but the Ziva brand was all-inclusive.
Yeah.
You're asking a question there, Martin?
All inclusive is. I was wondering how many floors it was gone from to. It's gone to 18 from.
I think it was 10. I stand to be corrected. 10 or maybe 12, but that will be now. If you think about the Barbados Hilton Hotel, they are possibly 8 or 10 stories. So this, and you know what they didn't bring? They should have brought a model so that you could see not just that hotel in its exclusive nature. You want to see the impact of that hotel dwarfing the entire city. Because it's taller than Central Bank. It's way taller than the Hilton. What about the scale of Bridgetown itself and its relationship to scale? We should have seen that model there to be able to compare, the scale of that construction.
It makes you wonder, what's the plan for the surrounding buildings in the near future? And surrounding buildings with some historical impact there as well. You're wondering, is there a longer plan, that's also part of this deal that we don't know about, but would potentially become part of it, because I'm bet they're gonna have to do something with that road. There's no way that road is gonna stay the same, going straight across the front there. So it makes you wonder, what is it that they have planned to do? You know?
Well, there is a plan to develop, I don't know if you remember the old eye hospital, which is on
Lady
Browns
Mead?
Beach, right opposite St. Patrick's, the Roman Catholic Cathedral. So
Yeah,
there's a
yeah.
plan to develop that into
There you go.
condos, apparently.
But
I
again,
have,
that's a very historical building that's
it's a
there.
very historic building.
Turning into condos.
Yeah, my mom used to work there, Lady Mead down there. I know down there very well.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I've heard, I can't, I've been trying to find it to be able to share with you. I have heard that there is a plan with developers to build another, that this Hyatt Ziva is like the first of 4 or 5. And this is the thing that's very, very upsetting, because, our grandchildren, if they're going to be going to the beaches, and it's going to be a very different environment. And the issue with developing your coast means that now what's happening on the interior of the island is there are these kind of exclusive lifestyle gated communities that look like they're in Miami, that wrap around a polo field or a golf course. So we're now moving from the coastal development into the interior. And so where do Bajans go to play? Many Bajans live in very small chattel houses without a big backyard. Where are they to go? Who is this place
And
for?
Barbados' population is quite dense, isn't it?
Yes,
It
it's
is.
200 and, well, close to 300,000,
300,000.
very
Yeah,
densely
300,000.
populated. But the population hasn't grown, in fairness, because
Oh,
we have a
wow.
lot of outward migration.
Yeah.
But I hear Mia wants to change that.
She does. She's trying to attract people through the 12-month stamp, and also trying to welcome, people to come in, because of course our NIS, right? You've got to make sure that there are people contributing.
Absolutely.
The YIDA project,
Yep.
Martin, who's going to be, are they going to be importing Chinese people to work there?
Ooh, Andre.
Yeah, I ask these kind of questions.
I know, and I'm glad you do. I would suggest from the rhetoric that you've seen, you showed that one of the gentleman's name escapes me, but there's a
Yes.
whole series there, and they talk about hundreds of jobs in the construction period. Well, I would think maybe even if 50 jobs for local Antiguans in this construction period that's happening now has happened, and I
Yeah.
would probably be being extraordinarily generous by a factor of 5.
Wow.
If you look through the legislation, anybody who needs a work permit, that's going to happen within 2 working weeks, or it might even be 5 days. But basically, it looks like a state within a state.
Indeed. See, if you invest
they're not paying
400,000,
any taxes.
yeah. And if you invest
Yeah,
400,000, you
for
become
a
an
family
Antiguan.
of 4.
Yeah, exactly.
For a family of 4.
You get a passport, citizenship.
Wow.
So do the numbers of how you could actually take over the democratic system. Now,
Exactly.
Yeah.
there's
yeah.
an interesting thought.
And,
It's not
and the
actually
Chinese know how to
expensive,
play a long
$20
game.
billion.
Yeah, they do.
They are all about the long game. That's
They can
what
play a
the
long
West
game.
has missed out.
Yeah.
But remember, China's still a developing nation, thanks to Clinton. Now,
I
listen,
mean,
you asked me about the YIDA project, and there's one project we haven't talked about in Antigua. There's another one that's managed to skip along under the radar. We are Antigua and Barbuda, right? And in Barbuda, we have the Peace, Love, and Happiness Project.
Yes.
Has that one?
I've heard about that.
And
Enlighten
when
us
I
on that
first
one.
heard about it, so I will. When I first heard about this, I thought fantastic, because the money man behind it is a gentleman by the name of Jean-Paul de Joria, who is Mitchell Hair Systems, a shampoo system, really good shampoos. He's also the man behind Patron Tequila, the tequila that took tequila from being a slammer to a refined after-dinner drink on the rocks. He recently sold his remaining shares for $5.7 billion to Bacardi. The man had money can't done. He's rated and billed as the conscious capitalist. So you're thinking, Barbuda, tricky place to do development and so on, because then Barbudan people, they're touchy and so forth. The Barbudans aren't touchy. They know what they have and they value it. And unfortunately, the people of the Western world mentality look at it and go, oh, that's poverty and this and that and the other. It's not poverty, it's a particular lifestyle that has a place in this world. They claim to be indigenous. They're not indigenous. They're what I would refer to as modern indigenous. And we had the hurricane come along, and we had Hurricane Irma mash up the place. And we had this little Hurricane Jose behind that provided a fantastic opportunity to reinforce the need for a mass evacuation, and a mandatory one. If you pay close attention and look at the records, it wasn't needed, but it got the people off the rock. And then Mr. Brown started talking about deracinated fools and inbreeding and so on. And speaking to these people who have just had their homes mashed up big time.
Destroyed. Yeah.
A huge trauma.
Wow.
And he was not kind to them. There was a veneer of kind and loving, but underneath it was really about taking over Barbuda, because the Antigua Barbuda Labour Party has always wanted Barbuda because it represented things. And they had left legally, the land ownership issue of it has always been a mess.
Right.
And nobody had sorted it out. The UPP attempted to, but they didn't. But the consensus and the feeling of Barbudans and what we understand in Antigua is that the land was community owned. You had somewhere to go and build your residence and somewhere to go and farm your land. Nothing wrong with that, you know. Not even in 2020. In fact, it's a great thing. But because it didn't bring in money, it was looked down on. So we have to bear in mind, Gaston Brown is a banker. Bankers think in particular ways. And the accountants, so anything that's unfortunate, oh, that's an externality. What is an externality? It's where society pays the price. That's all a week.
Bit of collateral damage.
Are paying the price. And the reason that I mentioned this is A, the arrogance of peace, love, and happiness as a name, and B, where they are doing their first project at Palmetto Point. And I invite people to get onto Google Earth and have a look at Palmetto Point. It is within a Ramsar site. Ramsar sites are international wetlands of importance. It's also a national park. And on the other side of the beach, you know, that wave that splits the beach between beach and ocean, is a protected fishery zone.
Exactly.
And they want to put 400 villas and private homes in the area. Who are the land developers involved in that? Discovery Land Company. And we discover the Discovery Land Company is an American company. They do high-end homes and so forth. But in Bahamas, and I can't remember which of the islands, it might have been Abaco, where Discovery Land went in and they created Baker's Cay Club or something. Plenty money, everybody happy. But after Dorian, they weren't so happy. They weren't so happy because they were treated like the proverbial.
I think they're listening to you because they're trying to disturb your connectivity there. So they might be
Stop it.
They might be doing that on purpose. They don't want us to know. But look, I really think it's great to have these conversations and have it in a forum. You know, we're never going to have them in our national television stations and sometimes not our radio stations either. But the good and the beauty about, you know, online and the internet and Facebook and YouTube and what's not is that we can have them. And I think if there's one thing that good that comes out of this COVID period is that West Indians are beginning to talk to each other. Absolutely. Not talk at or talk about, but we're talking to each other about what matters to us. You know, and we are always going to try to create a forum for that. So, you know, I really wish Akim was here because I know there's so much going on in St. Lucia with the Kabat, and then there's the other one that's going on there as well that he can go again. Because if you don't know, Kabat is being built on an indigenous land which was an Amerindian burial site. Again, it's about how we revaluing ourselves and our history, you know, and why do we allow the chase of this tourism dollar and product, you know, at the expense of our history, of our value, and of our worth of ourselves as a people. You know, and we must have these continued conversations all the time. You know, so we've been going for 2 hours straight, and guys, the comments have been going as well. So guys in the audience, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We can probably go on for quite a while as well. But Martin and Annalie, you know, Mark, any last words before I say anything?
No, it's been a fascinating listen, really, and I think we need more Martins and we need more Annalies, people who are passionate, people who, you know, at their heart believe and want a better Caribbean. And I can only but salute the two of you and thank you so much for all that you're doing in Antigua and in Barbados.
I agree. Phil?
Yeah, it's raised a lot of awareness in me. So those are things to think about, especially when it comes to innovation. There's some things I'd really like to start, because I have a few connections at home as well. I'd like to start to prod people a bit in that direction. So really good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree. And before we say goodbye, Annalie, the lemon polenta cake yesterday, how did it go down?
Oh, it was great. It was so good. It was so good. I did want to, if I could, I did want to close and share an extract of a poem from Kamau, if I could.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Oh, by all means.
And it's literally just 6 lines. It is not enough to be pause, to be whole, to be void, to be silent, to be semicolon, to be semi-colony.
I like that.
Wow.
Come
It's
out.
not enough to be semicolon or semicolony.
Colony.
Wow.
Gosh,
That is
You know,
deep.
and
That's deep.
yeah,
profound.
yeah,
Yeah.
Profound.
I like
Kamau.
yeah.
But it's been so great to have engaged with you all. Normally at this time on a Sunday, I'm lying in my hammock. So this has been great.
Well, thank you for coming out to the hammock to chat with us.
Yeah, I guess you still have time for that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
true. You still got a bit of time. You still got a bit of time.
Yeah, I do.
And we will talk again, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Most
that'd be good.
definitely. Most
And
definitely.
yourself, Martin? Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I think it's a conversation that needs to have repeat versions, and it would be great if somebody could perhaps take the strain from you guys, so that every week we could be banging this subject, because it's going to take a lot to get through these knuckleheads who just don't see it. And don't get me started. Thank you very much for having me. And it's been great to meet you.
Great to meet you.
One irony that I think is really curious is that I myself am Caucasian. I take it Annalie from visuals is Caucasian, and we have 3 gentlemen of color on the other side of the Atlantic championing the region, and them white people, them crazy white people, championing this region for shared reasons. And Mark, thank you so much for sharing that design of a road, because it shows what's possible when you use the wisdom of the crowd
Local knowledge.
and
Yeah.
let people express themselves.
You know?
Thank you.
No, thank you so
Thank
much.
you. It was
Thank you,
fantastic.
guys. Thanks for joining us.
Okay. Yes,
Thank
it
you for
is
having
not.
me.
Oh, guys, that was a good session today.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Lots to think about there. I'm glad you brought that example there, Mark, about the using the citizens to inform the road design. Because a common thing in innovation is that you look at, do the people want it? Is it desirable? Can we do it? And the third thing is always, if we don't do it, do we have a lot to lose, i.e. our reputation or relevance? So it's always those 3 things. And I wonder, in Barbados, a lot of, well, not just Barbados, across the Caribbean, the various territories that we've been looking at, when there's social action and activists stand up and speak about things, when you look at those three parameters, are the governments not saying that people want change? Are they not thinking that they can't change? Or are they thinking that if we don't change it, it doesn't affect us? And which is why we don't have a lot of innovation in those spaces.
I think it's a scary space for them because, governments and the professionals always resort to what they know and where they're safe. But from my own personal professional experience, I've got a lot of scars because perhaps we ask people too much sometimes, but that is the way that we have kind of transitioned within transport. You've got to ask people. You have to get them involved in the design. You've got, when I hear Annalie talking about going to a town hall session with a microphone that people going up to, I'm thinking, hang on, well, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that because nobody does that.
That's very old.
That's like 40 years ago.
Yeah.
We might take a blank sheet of paper with the area and some background drawings and say, look, what do you think, guys? Where do you think we should position certain things and have some models that they can work with and move from there? But that is how you engage. But it's
Yeah, I
scary.
mean-
And that's the truth. It's very scary.
I mean, the thing is that do we as a people feel like we're being listened to? Do we think it's going to make a difference? Do we, or are we throwing our hands up in the air? I mean, for as big as the Hayat is and all the issues around it, I've got to admit, people seem more concerned with the bassa between the government and Miss Ram than the actual impact of what was actually happening and really understanding. When I look at all the comments all over the place, you can see, you saw Miss Ram or her husband or whoever, talking about, their issue. Their issue is their issue. But I would see 300, 400, 500 comments of some saying they deserve it, some saying what Mia doing, some saying this, some saying that. Whenever you see then an article about the impact assessment, what it's going to mean for the area, I mean,
Very little contribution.
you see almost nothing.
Yeah.
So is that a case of people not paying attention, or is it a case of people just over years feeling like they're not being listened to, so no longer bothering, thinking, look, doesn't
Or
matter,
is
it's
it
going to happen.
that we don't feel equipped to engage in those sort of spaces?
Well, combination of both, right? So I think we don't
Equipped
feel it.
/ empowered.
Yeah, so we don't feel equipped, we don't feel empowered. It's been happening for so long, so we're not bothered. Some of it also is a little bit of the, I gotta say, the popularity, from Barbados' perspective, the popularity of Mia. So, are people's thinking she got us, she's thinking for us, so just let it happen. If she says it's okay, it's okay.
It's okay.
So there's a little bit of that, and people actually missing the real issues. You can support Mia and still be critical of something that's coming in thing. Those two things are not mutually exclusive, You can support her and still be critical of a development or something that she's allowed to happen.
Well,
I
and
think-
raise your voice, because she is there to represent the voice
Yeah.
of the people.
Yeah.
And if that voice is not being raised,
It comes back to
represent.
accountability too, right? We talk about
Yeah.
that. And do we feel like we can hold our politicians accountable for the decisions that they make?
I don't know. I think people are very. There's a lot of apathy when it comes to things like this, because people
Yeah.
feel as though they're the gestures are very tokenistic, and they don't feel as though they are properly engaged in the decision making. So I just think that people just don't have time now to properly engage with it, because they just feel let down.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Yeah.
that's definitely it. I think, and it's a shame. But hopefully, forums like this and the
Yeah.
ability for West Indians now to speak together, unfiltered, unfettered by red tape and all kinds of other things that sometimes can come in our way, that we can just have open dialogue as a region and come together and together put pressure on those who we voted in and lead us to do what's right by us and to listen to us as a voice,
Absolutely.
And so hopefully we can make that happen all the time. So guys, look, thank you all for staying with us for the last 2 hours. It's been a great conversation again today. As usual, you can find us on Twitter. We're already on Facebook, most of you, or on YouTube, but then also on Instagram as well. Invite your friends to these conversations, invite them to our page on YouTube or on Facebook as well, just so that we just want as many people across the region to join these conversations, and let's talk. Let's talk. Let's have a laugh sometimes, have a drink. Although today, I must admit, I had a bit of a headache earlier, so I was on the water today, guys. So nothing, nothing like that, just pure water today. But we want to keep having these conversations. So we're actually going to finish this as we began, with this powerful song from the mighty Gabby in Barbados.
I grew up fitting